It was a Tuesday morning, 9:17 a.m., Park Avenue, New York City. A Rolls Royce Phantom, ghost white, worth $500,000, was stopped dead in the middle of the street. Not parked, stopped. Engine silent, hazard lights blinking, traffic building behind it. Around the car, a driver in a black uniform, hood up, staring at an engine he could not read. Two mechanics from the nearest garage, tools out, phones out, completely stumped. Three assistants in expensive suits standing in a circle doing nothing useful at all. And inside the car, a man on a phone call that could not be interrupted. Richard Hartwell, 52 years old, one of the most powerful private equity investors in the country. In 43 minutes, he was supposed to walk into a boardroom on 57th Street and close a $340 million acquisition. 43 minutes, and his car was dead on Park Avenue. Nobody could fix it. The driver had tried, the mechanics had tried, the assistants had called 3 different numbers and gotten nowhere. 43 minutes was becoming 42, then 41, and then, from the edge of the pavement, a boy stepped forward. Thin, small, dirty sneakers 2 sizes too big, a gray hoodie with a torn sleeve, a face that was 10 years old but carried something much older behind the eyes. He looked at the car, he looked at the driver, he looked at the 2 mechanics crouched over the engine, and he asked one question, one single question, that stopped every expensive suit on Park Avenue cold, because it was the right question, the only question, the question that nobody with a qualification and a tool bag had thought to ask. And in the next 17 minutes, this boy, this 10-year-old boy living alone on the streets of New York City, was going to fix a Rolls Royce Phantom on Park Avenue and change his life forever. Before we go any further, drop Daniel in the comments right now if you believe that talent has nothing to do with where you were born or what you are wearing when the world finds you. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, because this story is one of the most extraordinary things I have ever told. And it starts not on Park Avenue, not with a Rolls Royce, not with $340 million. It starts in a small apartment in the Bronx 3 years ago, with a father and a boy and an engine that needed fixing. His name was Daniel Owens, 10 years old. He had been sleeping in doorways and under the 149th Street Bridge for 7 months. He ate when he could, he moved when he had to. He trusted almost nobody, but he was not broken, not even close, because Daniel Owens carried something with him everywhere he went. Something no doorway or hunger or cold New York night had been able to take from him. His father's voice. His father's name was Joseph Owens. Joseph was a mechanic, not a famous one, not a wealthy one. He worked out of a small garage in the South Bronx for 18 years. Hands always dark with grease, uniform always slightly too big, a laugh that arrived without warning and filled whatever room it was in. He was the kind of mechanic other mechanics called when something didn't make sense, not because he had the most expensive tools, because he had the best mind. He saw engines differently, not as collections of parts, as conversations. Every symptom was the engine trying to say something. Every fault was a sentence waiting to be translated. He started teaching Daniel when Daniel was 4 years old. Not formally, not with textbooks, just, "Here, hold this. Watch what this does. Listen to that sound. What do you think that means?" By the time Daniel was 6, he could name every component under the hood of the 3 most common engines Joseph worked on. By 7, he could diagnose a fault from sound alone. His father would start a car with a problem and say, "What's wrong with it?" Daniel would close his eyes, listen, and tell him. He was right more often than not. Joseph would laugh that laugh, shake his head. "Boy, you were born for this." Daniel was 7 years old when his father died. A Tuesday morning. Joseph was crossing the street 2 blocks from the garage. A car ran a red light. He died before the ambulance arrived.
Daniel was at school. He didn't find out until the afternoon. He sat in the principal's office and did not cry. Not because he wasn't devastated, because he was so devastated that his body did not know what to do with it. He sat very still, and somewhere in the stillness, he held onto the only thing he had left, his father's voice. Listen to what the engine is telling you. Every fault is just a sentence waiting to be translated. You were born for this. Daniel had no other family. His mother had left when he was 3. No grandparents he knew, no aunts or uncles who came forward. The system tried. 3 foster placements in 8 months, none of them held. By the time he was 9 and a half, Daniel Owens was on the street, alone, in New York City, with nothing but the clothes he was wearing and his father's voice in his head. Daniel had been watching the Rolls Royce for 11 minutes before he moved. He had been sitting on the steps of a building 3 doors down, eating half a bread roll he had found outside a bakery that morning when the car stopped. He watched the driver get out. He watched the hood go up. He watched 2 mechanics arrive and crouch over the engine with the particular body language of people who are already not sure. He watched 3 assistants in expensive suits stand in a circle and contribute nothing. He watched all of it, and he listened, because that is what his father taught him. Listen before you look. He heard the way the engine had died, not a gradual stutter, but a sudden, clean stop. He heard the starter motor turning over, the engine catching for a fraction of a second, almost firing, then nothing. He heard it. He understood it. He stood up, walked toward the car. The first assistant saw him coming when he was 4 feet away. The man looked at him the way certain people look at children on the street, the quick assessment, the conclusion, the dismissal, all in under 2 seconds. "Hey, back up. You can't be here." Daniel stopped. "I can fix it," he said. The assistant stared at him, then looked at the torn sleeve, the dirty sneakers, the half-eaten bread roll still in his hand. He almost laughed. "Kid, seriously, back up." He turned back to his phone. Daniel stood there for a moment. Then he walked around to the other side of the car. The second assistant didn't even look up. Invisible. A 10-year-old boy in a torn hoodie on Park Avenue, completely invisible. He stood at the edge of the engine bay. The 2 mechanics were looking at the fuel system, running diagnostics on a tablet, talking to each other in the low, frustrated voices of people who are running out of ideas and running out of time. Daniel watched them for 90 seconds. Then he said, quietly, directly, to nobody in particular, "When did the climate control get set to maximum?" The mechanics stopped talking, looked at each other, looked at the boy. "What?" said the first mechanic. "The climate control," Daniel said. "Someone turned it to maximum. When did that happen?" The driver straightened from the other side of the hood, looked at the dashboard through the windscreen. The climate control was on maximum. He had done it himself 20 minutes ago. The morning was cold. He hadn't thought about it. "What does that have to do with—" the second mechanic started. "On this engine," Daniel said, "maximum climate load pulls from the same relay as the primary fuel circuit. If there's already a weak connection on the relay," he paused, "the extra draw tips it over. The engine cuts out. Looks like a fuel pump fault. It's not." Complete silence. The 2 mechanics looked at each other. The first assistant had lowered his phone. "The relay is under the secondary fuse panel, behind the glove box, left side. If you reset it and turn the climate down, it'll start." Nobody moved for 3 seconds. Then the first mechanic looked at the second, then at the boy. Then he reached into the car. It took 17 minutes, not because the fix was complicated, because nobody wanted to believe a 10-year-old boy in a torn hoodie standing on Park Avenue with half a bread roll in his hand. So they checked everything else first. Fuel pump pressure? Fine. Electrical continuity? Fine. Starter motor? Fine. They came back to the relay, reset it, turned the climate control down, turned the key. The Rolls Royce Phantom started. First attempt, clean, quiet, perfect. The driver stood up slowly from the hood, stared at the engine running, then at the boy. The two mechanics straightened, said nothing. The three assistants looked at each other. The first assistant, the one who had told Daniel to back up, was looking at the ground. And in the back seat of the Rolls Royce Phantom, Richard Hartwell ended his phone call, looked up for the first time, saw his driver standing over the open hood, saw two mechanics putting their tools away, saw three assistants looking at something at the edge of the pavement. He followed their gaze. A boy, 10 years old, gray hoodie, torn sleeve, dirty sneakers, half-eaten bread roll, standing on Park Avenue, looking at the running engine with an expression that was not pride, not performance, just the quiet satisfaction of someone who heard what the engine was saying and answered it correctly. Richard Hartwell opened the car door. He stood on the pavement. He looked at the boy for a long moment. Then he looked at his driver. "Did he—" "Yes, sir," the driver said. Richard looked back at Daniel. "What's your name, Daniel?" The boy looked up at him. "Daniel," he said. "How old are you, Daniel?" "10." Richard Hartwell was quiet for a moment. He looked at the torn sleeve, the dirty sneakers, the half-eaten bread roll still in his hand. He looked at the engine running perfectly in a car that 4 adults had failed to fix. He looked at the boy's face, the face that was 10 years old and carried something much older behind the eyes. "Where do you live?" he said. Daniel looked at him steadily. "Wherever I can," he said. Richard Hartwell was 4 minutes late to the boardroom on 57th Street. He walked in, shook hands, sat down, and for the next 2 hours, he closed a $340 million acquisition with the focus and precision that had made him one of the most respected investors in the country. But in the back of his mind, the whole time, a boy on a pavement, wherever I can, the engine starting. You were born for this. He didn't know that last part yet. He didn't know about Joseph. He didn't know about the garage in the South Bronx. He didn't know about the Tuesday morning 3 years ago that took everything from a 7-year-old boy and left him with nothing but a voice in his head and hands that knew how to listen to engines. He didn't know any of it yet, but he was going to find out. His assistant, the one who had told Daniel to back up, had stayed on Park Avenue after the car left. Richard had asked him to. One instruction: find out everything. It took 3 hours. When the assistant called back, Richard was still in the building on 57th Street, in a smaller room, coffee going cold beside him. He listened without speaking for 4 minutes. The father, the garage, the accident, the Tuesday morning, the 3 foster placements, the street. 7 months. Alone. He sat with it for a moment after the call ended. Then he made 3 calls of his own. The first call was to a woman named Carol Simmons, director of a private educational foundation Richard had funded for 11 years. He described Daniel, his age, his situation, what he had done that morning. Carol Simmons listened. When he finished, she said, "Find him. Bring him to us." The second call was to his own attorney to begin the process of identifying Daniel's legal status and what support structures could be put in place immediately. The third call was to his driver. Go back to where we broke down and every street within 4 blocks. Find the boy. It took 2 days. Daniel was not easy to find. He moved. He stayed in shadows. He had learned to be invisible. But on the second afternoon, outside a bodega on 138th Street, the driver found him. Daniel looked at the black car, at the driver. He didn't run. He just looked. The driver got out. "Mr. Hartwell would like to speak with you," he said, "if you're willing." Daniel looked at the car for a long moment. Then he looked at the driver. "Is it about the Rolls?" he asked. "Yes," the driver said. Daniel thought about it. Then he got in. They met in Richard's office on the 34th floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows, the city spread below, a desk that cost more than most people's cars. Daniel sat across from it in the dirty sneakers and torn hoodie. He looked at the view for a moment, then at Richard. Richard looked back at him. "How did you know," he said, "about the relay?" Daniel thought about how to explain it. "My dad taught me," he said. "Every engine has a voice. You just have to learn how to listen." Richard was quiet. "Where is your dad now?" Daniel looked at the desk between them. "He died," he said, 3 years ago." "I'm sorry," Richard said. Daniel nodded. He had heard those words many times. They still meant something when someone said them and meant it. Richard said them and meant it. "Your father taught you all of that?" Richard said. "At 10 years old?" "He started when I was 4, Daniel said. Richard looked at this boy, at the face that was 10 and carried something much older behind the eyes. He thought about the boardroom on 57th Street, the $340 million, the 2 mechanics with their tablets and their tool bags, and a 10-year-old boy with half a bread roll who asked the only question that mattered. "Daniel," he said, "I want to help you, if you'll let me." Daniel looked at him, not with the desperate gratitude of someone who has been waiting to be rescued, with the careful assessment of someone who has learned that offers from strangers require examination. "Why?" he asked. Richard thought about it honestly. "Because what you did on Tuesday morning," he said, "took more intelligence than anyone else on that street had. And you're 10 years old and sleeping outside, and that is wrong." Daniel looked at him for a long moment. Then he looked at the view. The city spread 40 floors below. Somewhere down there, 138th Street, the bodega, the doorway. He looked at it for a moment. Then he looked back at Richard. "Okay," he said. Richard Harwell did not just write a check, he did it properly. Carol Simmons at the Educational Foundation arranged immediate housing, a small supervised residence for children in similar situations, safe, structured, staffed by people who knew what they were doing. Daniel had a bed, a door that locked, a window. The first night he slept in a real bed in 7 months, he lay awake for a long time, just looking at the ceiling. He was not thinking about the Rolls Royce. He was not thinking about Richard Harwell. He was thinking about his father, about a small garage in the South Bronx, about a man crouching beside an engine saying, "Listen, what is it telling you?" He stared at the ceiling, and for the first time in 3 years, he felt like the answer was something good. Then he slept for 11 hours. The foundation enrolled him in school the following week. His first assessment left the teachers quiet. Reading 4 years above his age, mathematical reasoning that made the assessors look at each other, mechanical intuition that nobody in that room had ever seen in a child. Carol Simmons called Richard that evening. "You found something special," she said. Richard looked out the window of his office, 34 floors above the city. Somewhere below, 138th Street, a bodega, a boy who had been invisible for 7 months. "He was already there," Richard said quietly. "I just stopped walking past him." Stay with this story for a moment, because there is a version of this lesson that is easy to take home. Always be kind to strangers. You never know who they are. You never know what they carry. That lesson is real, but it is not the deepest one. The deepest one is Daniel, a 10-year-old boy on a street in New York City. No home, no family, no safety net of any kind, and yet carrying something completely intact, his father's voice, his father's teaching, the knowledge of how to listen to an engine and hear what it is trying to say. Poverty had taken everything from Daniel except the thing that mattered most. His father's put inside him. The curiosity, the patience, the ability to ask the right question when everyone around him was asking the wrong ones. That cannot be taken. Not by loss, not by hunger, not by 7 months on the street. It was his. It had always been his. Think about what that means. Think about what you are carrying right now. The things your parents gave you, the things your failures taught you, the things that survived everything that tried to take them, and ask yourself whether you are using them, whether you are listening to what the engine is telling you. Daniel was 10 years old, alone, hungry, and he was still listening. Are you? Before you go, I want to hear from you. Drop Joseph in the comments if this story moved you, for Daniel's father, who taught a 4-year-old boy to listen to engines and never knew that lesson would one day save a $340 million meeting and change his son's life forever. And tell me this, is there someone in your life, a parent, a teacher, a stranger who gave you something that has survived everything? Tell me about it in the comments. I read every single one. If this story hit you, like the video, share it with someone who needs to hear it today, and subscribe if you haven't already. Turn on notifications because the next story is already coming and you do not want to miss it. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one.